The wind howls across the empty quarter like a living thing, carrying with it the eternal song of a world that has known war since before memory. Chagoris stretches beneath an endless sky, a planet of vast steppes and towering mountains, of nomadic tribes and proud horsemen who have measured their worth in the thunder of hooves and the flash of curved blades since the first humans set foot upon this savage earth. The grasses bow and rise in waves that stretch to every horizon, golden and silver and rust red depending on the season, and the tribes who call this land home have learned that survival belongs only to those who move, who ride, who refuse to let the wind catch them standing still. This is a world where the strong devour the weak without apology, where a man's worth is measured by the scars he carries and the enemies he has sent to the sky burial grounds. The steppe tribes war constantly among themselves, raiding for horses and women and glory, their khans rising and falling with the seasons like the grass itself. To the south lie the Palatine territories, where soft city dwellers hide behind walls of stone and believe themselves civilized because they have forgotten how to ride. The tribesmen of the steppes hold these people in contempt, these merchants and priests who have traded freedom for the illusion of safety, who worship strange gods in temples of carved rock, while the true gods ride the wind above the endless plains. Among these tribes, the Talskars hold a place of grudging respect, not the largest clan, nor the wealthiest, but possessed of a fierce reputation for producing warriors of uncommon skill. Their Khan, Khan, rules with the iron hand that necessity demands, for weakness invites death on the steppes as surely as winter invites cold. His people survive by raiding and trading, by knowing when to fight and when to flee, by reading the wind and the weather and the movements of rival clans the way soft men read books. It is into this world that something falls from the sky. The night begins like any other in the encampment of the Talskars, with fires burning low and sentries watching the darkness for signs of rival raiders. Then light splits the heavens, a streak of burning gold that tears across the star field like a blade across silk. The elders cry out in alarm, reaching for weapons, but the light is already gone, plunging beyond the horizon with a sound like distant thunder. Some call it an omen of doom. Others speak of sky spirits descending to walk among mortals. Khan says nothing, but his eyes follow the trajectory of the falling star, and when morning comes, he gathers his finest riders and sets out toward the impact site. What they find there defies understanding. The crater still smokes when the Talskar riders arrive, their horses snorting and stamping at the strange smell that rises from the scorched earth. At the center of the devastation lies something that should not exist, a pod of gleaming metal, its surface etched with symbols that hurt the eyes to examine too closely. And emerging from that pod, standing in the ash and debris with an expression of preternatural calm, is a child. But this is no ordinary child. Even at this impossible young age, the being that will become Jaghatai Khan stands taller than a grown man's waist, his limbs thick with muscle that no infant should possess. His eyes, dark and fierce and ancient beyond measure, meet Khan's gaze without fear or supplication. There is no crying, no confusion, only a watchful intelligence that seems to assess the riders surrounding him with the calculating patience of a predator. Khan dismounts slowly, his hand resting on the hilt of his curved blade. The other riders murmur among themselves, speaking of demons and spirits and skyborn monsters that should be killed before they can bring ruin upon the tribe. But Khan has not survived decades of steppe warfare by acting rashly. He approaches the child step by careful step, and when he stands before that impossible figure, he sees something in those dark eyes that makes his decision for him. He sees a conqueror. The Khan removes his own cloak and wraps it around the child's shoulders, claiming him before witnesses as a son of the Talskars. Some of his riders protest, their fear overcoming their respect for their leader, but Khan silences them with a look. Whatever this child is, whatever destiny brought him screaming down from the stars, he belongs to the Talskars now, and Khan, who has spent his entire life seeking advantage over his rivals, recognizes advantage when it falls from the sky and lands at his feet. They name him Jaghatai, which in the tongue of the steppes means something between the one who came from beyond and he who the wind carries. The name proves prophetic in ways that no one could have anticipated. The child grows at a rate that terrifies and amazes in equal measure. Within weeks, Jaghatai stands as tall as the adolescent boys of the tribe. Within months, he towers over most grown men. His appetite for learning matches his physical growth. He devours the teachings of the tribe's warriors and wise men with an intensity that borders on obsession, mastering skills in days that other children take years to develop. He learns to ride before he can properly speak, his body moving in perfect harmony with the horses that seem drawn to him as if by instinct. He learns to shoot from the saddle, to fight with blade and spear and bare hands, to read the weather and the wind and the movements of game across the steppes. But it is in warfare that young Jaghatai truly excels. The first time he rides to battle, the other warriors watch him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. He is still a child by their reckoning, despite his monstrous size, and the steppes offer no mercy to those who underestimate their enemies. The raid is a simple affair, a strike against a rival clan's horse herds, the sort of low-stakes conflict that the tribes engage in constantly. Jaghatai rides with the advanced scouts, his borrowed blade held with a grip that suggests lifetimes of practice. What follows becomes the stuff of legend. The enemy riders who emerge to defend their herds find themselves facing something beyond their comprehension. Jaghatai moves through them like wind through grass, his blade rising and falling with a speed that the human eye can barely follow. He does not fight the way the steppe warriors fight, with wild courage and screaming war cries. Instead, he fights with a cold precision that speaks of calculation rather than emotion, each movement flowing into the next, like water finding its course downhill. When the last defender falls, Jaghatai sits motionless on his horse amid the carnage, breathing no harder than if he had taken a gentle ride across the plains. Khan watches from the hill above, and in his heart he feels a mixture of pride and something that might be fear. He has claimed a god as his son, and now he must reckon with what that means. The years that follow transform the Talskars from a minor tribe into a power to be reckoned with. Under Jaghatai's guidance, their warriors adopt new tactics, new formations, new ways of making war that leave their enemies reeling. The young war chief, for Khan, grants him command of the Talskar warriors while still technically a child, demonstrates an understanding of warfare that seems to spring from nowhere, intuitive leaps of strategic brilliance that no teacher could have imparted. He teaches them to fight in coordinated units rather than as individuals, to use the terrain and the weather as weapons, to strike fast and withdraw before the enemy can mount an effective response. The other clans, accustomed to the chaotic swirl of traditional steppe warfare, find themselves unable to adapt to these new methods. One by one, they fall, some destroyed utterly, others absorbed into the growing Talskar Confederation. But Jagatai's ambitions extend beyond mere tribal dominance. He studies the Palatine cities to the south, those bastions of settled civilization that the steppe tribes have raided and despised for generations. Where other Khans see only targets for plunder, Jaghatai sees obstacles to be overcome. The soft city dwellers possess technologies and resources that the nomads lack. Metal forges capable of producing superior weapons, stone walls that can withstand siege, organized governments that can coordinate defense across great distances. To truly unite Chogoris under his rule, Jaghatai must conquer not just the steppes, but everything that lies beyond them. He begins to plan accordingly. The campaign against the Palatine nobles unfolds over years, a methodical war of attrition that slowly strips away the city's advantages while magnifying the nomads' strengths. Jaghatai refuses to throw his warriors against the stone walls in futile charges, the mistake that has doomed every previous attempt to conquer the southern territories. Instead, he cuts the cities off from their trade routes, intercepts their supply caravans, picks off their patrols and garrisons in 1,000 small engagements that bleed them white without ever offering the decisive battle they crave. The nobles, trained in a different style of warfare, do not know how to respond to an enemy who refuses to stand and fight. They send their armies into the steppes to hunt the nomad confederation, only to find that Jaghatai's forces have melted away like morning mist. When those armies turn back toward home, exhausted and demoralized, they find wolf riders harrying their flanks, picking off stragglers, turning every mile of the march into a running battle. City after city falls, not to direct assault but to starvation and despair. The defenders watch their supplies dwindle, their reinforcements fail to arrive, their allies abandon them one by one. When Jaghatai finally rides through their gates, it is not as a conqueror storming the walls, but as an inevitability that they have seen approaching for months. He shows mercy to those who surrender quickly and without conditions. Those who resist learn that the young Khan's patience, while vast, is not infinite. The unification of Chogoris takes decades, but Jaghatai pursues it with the same relentless efficiency he brings to everything. Tribe after tribe, city after city, kingdom after kingdom, all fall before the advancing confederation. Some join willingly, recognizing the futility of resistance against a force that seems more like a natural phenomenon than an army. Others fight to the last man and are erased from history, their names forgotten, their bloodlines extinguished. Through it all, Jaghatai continues to grow, not just in physical stature but in wisdom and authority. He becomes the Great Khan, a title that signifies his rule over all the clans of the steppes and all the territories they have conquered. His Ordu, the military organization he has created to coordinate the efforts of the United Tribes, stretches across the entire planet, a machine of war that has never known defeat. But even as he achieves the pinnacle of planetary dominance, Jaghatai finds himself looking upward, toward the stars from which he fell so many years ago. He does not know what he is or where he truly comes from, but something in his blood whispers of a destiny that extends far beyond this single world. He has conquered Chogoris, but the universe stretches infinite and eternal above him, and he cannot help but wonder what other conquests await. The answer arrives in the form of golden ships descending from the sky. The transformation of Jaghatai from tribal warlord to planetary conqueror unfolds across decades of relentless warfare. Each campaign adds to his legend. Each victory extends the boundaries of his dominion, and each battle teaches lessons that will later reshape the entire concept of imperial warfare. The first great test comes against the Kuraid Confederation, a loose alliance of steppe tribes that is formed specifically to oppose the Talskar expansion. Their Khan, a weathered warrior named Gorchek of the Bone Wolves, commands forces that outnumber Jaghatai's own by 3 to 1. Conventional wisdom suggests that the young warlord has overreached, that his string of victories has bred overconfidence that will now prove fatal. Jaghatai proves conventional wisdom wrong. Rather than meeting the Kuraid host in the pitched battle they expect, the great Khan disperses his forces into dozens of smaller raiding parties. Each party strikes at a different point along the enemy's supply lines, destroying food stores, stampeding horse herds, poisoning water sources. The Kuraid warriors, expecting a decisive confrontation, instead find themselves chasing ghosts across the endless steppes. For 3 months, Jaghatai maintains this campaign of attrition. His warriors suffer casualties, certainly, but the Kuraids suffer worse, not from battle, but from hunger and thirst and the slow, grinding despair of an enemy who refuses to stand and fight. When Gorchek finally manages to corner a significant Talskar force near the salt flats of Meridian, his warriors are exhausted, demoralized, and weak from malnourishment. The battle that follows is less a contest than a massacre. Jaghatai's fresh forces sweep through the Kuraid lines like wind through autumn leaves, their curved blades rising and falling in patterns that have become instinctive through constant practice. Gorchek dies beneath the great Khan's own sword, his final moments spent watching his army dissolve into chaos around him. The surviving Kuraid tribes submit within weeks, their leaders recognizing that further resistance will only bring extinction. Jaghatai accepts their surrender with characteristic pragmatism, incorporating their warriors into his growing ordu and their traditions into the emerging culture of his confederation. The bone totems of the wolves join the horse standards of the Talskars, symbols of unity forged through conquest. This pattern repeats across Chogoris. Each campaign brings new challenges, and Jaghatai meets each with tactics tailored to the specific situation. Against the fortified city-states of the Palatine South, he employs siege warfare that would seem familiar to any military theorist. Blockades, starvation, the systematic destruction of external support. Against the nomadic Izagi of the eastern steppes, he fights their own style of mobile warfare, but with superior organization and coordination. Against the mountain strongholds of the Drakari, he uses infiltration and surprise attacks that bypass the advantages their terrain provides. The great Khan learns from every enemy, incorporating successful tactics into his own doctrine, while discarding approaches that prove ineffective. His warriors become versatile beyond anything the steppes have seen before, capable of fighting in any terrain and against any opponent. The Ordu grows not just in numbers, but in capability, a military machine that refines itself through constant testing. But Jaghatai's greatest innovations come in the realm of organization rather than tactics. The traditional steppe warfare is anarchic, each warrior fighting as an individual within a loosely coordinated mob. The great Khan imposes discipline without destroying the personal initiative. that makes his warriors effective. He creates hierarchies of command that allow orders to flow from Khan to captain to warrior without the confusion that typically plagues tribal armies. He establishes systems for supply and logistics that enable his forces to operate far from their bases for extended periods. Most significantly, he develops the concept of the Brotherhood, semi-independent military units that can operate alone or in concert as the situation demands. Each brotherhood has its own identity, its own traditions, its own commander who holds authority within his domain. But all brotherhoods answer to the Great Khan, and all can be combined into larger formations when major campaigns require concentrated force. This organizational structure will later become the template for the White Scars Legion, proving as effective against the Xenos empires of the galaxy as it proved against the tribes and kingdoms of Chagoris. The conquest proceeds year by year, victory by victory. The young warlord who emerged from a crater surrounded by dead aliens becomes the undisputed master of an entire world. Yet even as his dominion expands to encompass every corner of Chagoris, Jagatai's gaze continues to turn upward, toward the stars that wheel endlessly across the sky. He knows, with a certainty that transcends mere intuition, that his destiny lies beyond this world. The endless steppes that seem so vast to his subjects feel like a cage to him, a limitation on movement that his soul cannot accept. He has conquered everything there is to conquer on Chagoris, and the hunger for more remains unsatisfied. When the Emperor's ships finally descend from the heavens, Jaghatai greets them not with fear or confusion, but with something closer to relief. At last, the larger stage for which he was always destined has revealed itself. The conquest of Chagoris is complete. The conquest of the galaxy is about to begin. The day the Emperor comes to Chagoris begins like any other in the great gathering of the Ordu. Warriors sharpen their blades and tend to their horses, preparing for the endless work of maintaining an empire that spans an entire world. Children play at war in the spaces between the yurts, their wooden swords clacking in imitation of their fathers and mothers. The smell of cooking meat rises from 1,000 fires, and the sound of throat singing carries on the wind as the old ones remember battles long past. Then the sky tears open. The vessels that descend through Chagoris' atmosphere bear no resemblance to anything the nomads have seen before. Vast constructs of gold and adamantine, their hulls blazing with protective fields that turn the air itself to fire. They move with a purpose that suggests intelligence, descending not randomly but directly toward the great encampment where the Khan holds court. The warriors scramble for their weapons, their horses screaming and stamping at the impossible sight, but Jaghatai raises his hand for stillness. He has waited for this moment his entire life, though he could not have said what he was waiting for. Something in his blood recognizes these ships, these visitors from beyond the sky. Something ancient and instinctual tells him that his questions are about to be answered. The largest vessel settles to earth a mile from the encampment, its landing sending tremors through the ground that can be felt in the bones. For a long moment, nothing moves. The nomads wait in tense silence, their hands on their weapons, their eyes fixed on the golden hull. Then a ramp descends and figures begin to emerge. The first are giants in golden armor, warriors whose stature rivals Jaghatai's own. They move with the precision of trained killers, their weapons held ready but not raised, their helmed heads scanning the assembled nomads with the cold assessment of predators examining potential prey. Behind them come others in different livery, administrators perhaps, or advisors, their robes marking them as something other than pure warriors, and behind them all comes he. The emperor of mankind needs no introduction. His presence announces itself in ways that transcend mere physical appearance, though his physical appearance is itself remarkable enough. He stands taller even than the golden warriors who attend him, his features perfect and terrible in their beauty, his eyes holding depths that seem to contain entire galaxies. Power radiates from him like heat from a forge, a psychic pressure that presses against the minds of everyone present, promising either salvation or annihilation, depending on how they respond. The nomads fall to their knees almost without conscious thought, their bodies responding to something their minds cannot fully comprehend. Even the proudest warriors, men who have never bowed to any mortal authority, find themselves prostrate before this being who is so clearly more than mortal. Only Jaghatai remains standing. He walks forward through the kneeling masses, his stride unhurried, his expression unreadable. The golden warriors shift slightly, their weapons tracking his movement, but a gesture from the emperor stills them. Father and son, for that is what they are, in a sense deeper than mere biology. Face each other for the first time since Jaghatai was torn from his gestation pod and cast across the stars. What passes between them in that moment remains unknown to all observers. Some later accounts speak of a psychic communion, a sharing of memories and purposes that transcended mere words. Others suggest that they simply stood in silence, taking each other's measure, two beings of immense power recognizing something of themselves in each other. The truth, as is often the case with matters involving the Primarchs, has been lost to the mist of history. What is known is that when the moment passes, Jaghatai Khan kneels. It is not the abject prostration of the nomads around him, nor the fearful submission of a conquered enemy. Instead, it is the measured acknowledgement of one warrior to another, of a son recognizing the authority of his father. Jaghatai has spent his entire life conquering, never submitting. But this is different. This is not submission. This is recognition of a greater purpose, an acceptance of a destiny that extends far beyond anything a single world could offer. The Emperor speaks then, his voice carrying effortlessly to every ear despite its measured tone. He speaks of the Imperium of Man, the great crusade to reunite humanity's scattered worlds under a single banner. He speaks of the Primarchs, the 20 sons he created to lead his armies, and of how they were stolen and scattered by the dark powers that lurk in the Immaterium. He speaks of the legion that awaits Jaghatai, the warriors who carry his genetic template, who have been searching for their gene father across the galaxy. He speaks of war on a scale that makes Chogoris's conflicts seem like children's games. Jaghatai listens, and in his heart, something that has been caged since birth finally spreads its wings. The endless steppes of his homeworld, vast as they seemed, have always felt like a prison to something inside him. Now he understands why. He was never meant for a single world. He was born for the stars, for wars that span galaxies, for conquests that will echo through eternity. When the Emperor offers him command of the 5th Legion, Jaghatai accepts without hesitation. The transition that follows transforms both the Khan and the Legion that will become his. The 5th Legion, known before his discovery as the Star Hunters, had developed their own culture and traditions during the long years without their Primarch. They were competent warriors, disciplined and effective. but they lacked the spark of identity that their brother legions had found under their own Gene Father's guidance. Jaghatai changes everything. He renames them first, casting off the Star Hunter's appellation in favor of something that speaks to the culture he will impose upon them. They become the White Scars, a name that carries multiple meanings, the ritual scarification that marks warriors of achievement on Chogoris, the pale hue of their armor, the lightning-fast strikes that will become their hallmark. The name announces to the galaxy what they will become. Warriors who mark themselves, and their enemies who move like wind and strike like lightning. The transformation goes far deeper than nomenclature. Jaghatai restructures the Legion's organization along the lines of his Ordu, creating brotherhoods that function as semi-independent fighting forces united under his overall command. Each brotherhood develops its own traditions and specialties while maintaining loyalty to the greater whole, a balance between independence and unity that mirrors the confederation of tribes Jaghatai built on Chogoris. He introduces them to the ways of the steppes, the value of speed over static defense, the importance of mobility in warfare, the tactics of the lightning raid and the strategic withdrawal. Legionaries who had been trained to hold ground and grind down enemies learn instead to flow like water, to strike and retreat, to exhaust their enemies through constant motion, rather than meeting them in pitched battle. Most significantly, Jaghatai brings the Chogorian philosophy of the Stormseers into the Legion's spiritual core. The Psykers of the White Scars, guided by the traditions of the tribal shamans, develop a unique approach to their abilities that emphasizes harmony with the natural forces of the universe rather than domination over them. They read the winds of the warp as their ancestors read the winds of the steppes, navigating its currents rather than forcing their way through. This decision proves controversial among the Legion's Terran-born officers, some of whom distrust the mysticism that Jaghatai embraces. The Emperor's decree at Nicaea forbidding the use of psychic powers in the Legions creates further tension. But Jaghatai, in a characteristic display of independence, interprets the edict with considerable flexibility. The Stormseers continue their practices, though they do so with discretion, and the Khan makes it clear that he will not be lectured on the nature of the warp by those who have never ridden its currents. It is an early sign of the independent streak that will define his relationship with the Imperium throughout the Great Crusade. The White Scars establish their recruiting grounds on Chogoris, drawing new legionaries from the same steppe tribes that Jaghatai once united. These warriors bring with them the traditions of their people, the fierce independence, the love of the open sky, the belief that a warrior's worth is measured by his deeds rather than his words. They blend with the existing Legion culture to create something new, a synthesis of Terran discipline and Chogorian spirit. The transformation takes years, but when it is complete, the White Scars emerge as one of the Imperium's most distinctive fighting forces. They're not the methodical conquerors of the Ultramarines or the brutal shock troops of the World Eaters. Instead, they are the wind made flesh, appearing from nowhere to strike devastating blows before vanishing back into the void. Enemies who expect to face them in conventional battle find themselves fighting phantoms, harried and exhausted by raiders who refuse to stand and be destroyed. Jaghatai himself rides at the forefront of his Legion's campaigns, leading from the front in the manner of the steppe Khans who preceded him. He pilots his custom jet bike across battlefields at speeds that would kill lesser beings, his curved blade harvesting enemies with every pass. He seems to revel in the rush of combat, the wind in his face, the thunder of engines beneath him, a born warrior finally unleashed upon a galaxy that provides enemies worthy of his abilities. But even as he embraces his role as a war leader of the Imperium, part of Jaghatai remains apart. He does not seek the company of his brother Primarchs with the enthusiasm that some of them display, preferring the solitude of his quarters or the camaraderie of his own sons. He questions aspects of the Imperial project that others accept without thought, wondering aloud about the cost of unity imposed at sword point, about the cultures destroyed in the name of compliance, about whether the Imperium is building something worth preserving, or simply replacing one tyranny with another. These questions do not make him disloyal. His commitment to the Emperor's cause never wavers, but they do make him uncomfortable company for some of his brothers. The rigid certainty that defines Rogel Dawn or Robut Gilliman finds no purchase in Jaghatai's soul. He serves, but he serves as a free man, not a slave. He obeys, but he reserves the right to question. It is a distinction that will prove crucial in the dark days to come. The Great Crusade carries the white scars across the galaxy, from the core worlds near Terra to the outermost fringes of human settlement and beyond. Jaghatai Khan leads his legion through campaigns without number, bringing world after world into compliance with the imperial truth. The enemies blur together in the chronicles of those years, alien empires that had enslaved human populations, human civilizations that had devolved into barbarism or fallen to the worship of strange gods, machine intelligences left over from humanity's golden age that now viewed organic life as a resource to be harvested. Against all of them, the white scars proved devastatingly effective. Their lightning warfare tactics shatter defensive lines before they can solidify, their mobility allowing them to appear where enemies least expect and vanish before effective resistance can be organized. Fortresses that might have held against conventional siege for months fall within days when Jaghatai's warriors strike at their supply lines and communications, isolating them from relief and grinding down their garrisons through exhaustion rather than direct assault. The Khan develops a reputation among the legions, respected for his tactical brilliance but held at a certain distance, a brother who does not quite fit the mold that the others occupy. His relationship with each of his fellow Primarchs reflects this complexity, shaped by their individual personalities and philosophies. With Horus Lupercal, first among the Primarchs and the Emperor's chosen war master, Jaghatai maintains a cordial but wary relationship. He respects the Lunar Wolf's capabilities as a commander and politician, acknowledging the skills that led the Emperor to name him Master of the Great Crusade. But something about Horus's easy charm and ready smile strikes a false note in Jaghatai's ears, a sense that the War Master plays a role rather than revealing his true self. The Khan keeps his counsel, offering neither open challenge nor unreserved support. Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists represents a different sort of relationship. The two Primarchs share a certain directness of manner, a preference for honest words over diplomatic evasion, but their philosophies of warfare could not be more different. Dawn, the master of defense, building fortifications that seem destined to stand for eternity, and Jaghatai, the lord of the lightning assault, who sees in walls only obstacles to be bypassed. They respect each other as craftsmen, might respect a colleague working in a different medium, acknowledging skill without fully understanding the motivation behind it. Sanguinius of the Blood Angels draws something closer to genuine warmth from the Khan. The angel-winged Primarch possesses a nobility of spirit that Jaghatai recognizes as authentic. A leader who inspires through genuine virtue rather than manipulation or fear. They fight together on several occasions during the crusade, their forces complementing each other's strengths in campaigns that become models of interlegion cooperation. Jaghatai finds in Sanguinius the rare thing, a brother he would choose to know even if duty did not require it. With Magnus the Red, Jaghatai shares an unexpected kinship. The Lord of Prospero's obsession with knowledge and the warp should make him anathema to the pragmatic Khan. Yet something in Magnus's pursuit of understanding resonates with Jaghatai's own questioning nature. Both Primarchs refuse to accept received wisdom without examination. Both push against the boundaries that others impose. Both believe that truth must be sought even when the seeking proves uncomfortable. Their debates on the nature of the warp and the proper use of psychic powers continue across years and campaigns, neither convincing the other, but both gaining from the exchange. Mortarion of the Death Guard presents a more complicated picture. The gaunt Primarch's hatred of psychers and witchery should place him in direct opposition to Jaghatai and his Stormseers. Yet something else connects them. A shared experience of overthrowing tyranny, of rising from oppression to lead their own people. They understand each other in ways that transcend their philosophical differences, though that understanding does not translate into friendship. There is too much darkness in Mortarion, too much of the suffering he endured on Barbarous, still poisoning his spirit. Jaghatai watches him with the wariness one reserves for a brother who walks too close to a precipice. Lionel Johnson of the Dark Angels remains an enigma, his secrets folded so deeply that even a Primarch's insight cannot penetrate them. Jaghatai distrusts the lion on instinct, finding in his hidden nature something fundamentally opposed to the openness that the Khan values. They work together when duty demands but never seek each other's company otherwise. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves should be a natural ally. Both are leaders of warrior cultures from Death Worlds. Both value personal prowess and the bonds of brotherhood above abstract principles. Yet their relationship remains oddly distant, perhaps because they are too similar in some ways, while being utterly different in others. Russ embraces his role as the Emperor's executioner with a fervor that Jaghatai finds disturbing, a willingness to kill his own brothers if ordered that speaks of devotion too close to fanaticism. Through all these relationships, Jaghatai maintains his essential nature, engaged but apart, present but uncommitted. He fulfills his duties to the crusade with excellence that none can question. Yet he remains the brother who stands slightly outside the circle, watching and judging and keeping his own counsel. The campaigns continue regardless of politics and relationships. The White Scars bring dozens of worlds into compliance during these years, their rapid assault tactics proving particularly effective against enemies who expect the grinding sieges that characterize other Legion operations. Jaghatai hones his forces into an instrument of perfect mobility, capable of projecting power across entire subsectors while maintaining the speed that is their defining characteristic. The Kondax campaign becomes one of their defining engagements. Deep in the galactic west, the Orc Empire of the Kondax system has grown powerful enough to threaten the Crusade's flanks, and Jaghatai is tasked with eliminating the threat. He leads his White Scars into a war that stretches across years, hunting the green-skin warbands across planets and asteroid fields, denying them the pitched battles they crave while bleeding them through 10,000 smaller engagements. It is brutal work lacking the glory of faster conquests, but Jaghatai pursues it with characteristic patience. The orcs are dangerous enemies, their numbers vast and their resilience legendary, but they cannot adapt to an enemy who refuses to fight on their terms. Jaghatai draws them into pursuit after pursuit, leading them into ambushes and killing grounds, whittling down their strength while preserving his own forces. The campaign keeps him far from the center of imperial power, far from the political maneuvering that increasingly dominates the Crusades' leadership. He receives news of events elsewhere in fragments. The Council of Nicaea that officially bans psychic powers, the Emperor's return to Terra to pursue his secret project, Horus's elevation to Warmaster, and the changes this brings to the Crusades' conduct. All of it seems distant, irrelevant to the work of hunting orcs across the void. He does not know that this isolation is deliberate. Forces are moving in the shadows of the Imperium, conspiracies taking shape that will reshape the galaxy. The White Scars, kept at the edge of events, receive only carefully filtered information about the wider war. When Jaghatai sends astropathic queries to his brothers, seeking news and orders, his messages seem to disappear into the void. Replies, when they come at all, are delayed and contradictory. The Khan begins to suspect that something is terribly wrong, but the nature of the threat remains unclear. He commits the White Scars to the final assault on the Kondak's orcs, determined to finish this campaign before returning to investigate the growing silence from the Imperium's heart. It is a decision that will haunt him for centuries. The relationship between Jaghatai Khan and his legion runs deeper than mere genetics. The White Scars are not simply warriors who carry their Primarch's gene seed. They are inheritors of his philosophy, practitioners of his doctrine, believers in his vision of what it means to be both free and dutiful. Understanding this relationship requires examining the core beliefs that Jaghatai brought from Chogoris and implanted in the hearts of his sons. The first principle is motion. To the warriors of the steppes, stillness is death, both literally, because a stationary target is an easy target, and spiritually, because a soul that stops growing begins to wither. Jaghatai teaches his legion that they must be in constant motion, not just physically, but intellectually and emotionally. They must always be learning, always questioning, always seeking new challenges to overcome. This principle manifests in the White Scars' distinctive tactical doctrine. Where other legions might establish defensive positions and hold them against all comers, the 5th Legion rarely fights that way. They strike and withdraw, advance and retreat, keeping their enemies perpetually off balance through constant movement. Their formations flow like water, filling gaps when they appear and retreating when pressure builds. The second principle is freedom. Jaghatai was a slave to no one on Chogoris, and he refuses to become a slave, even to the Emperor, whose cause he serves. This does not mean disloyalty. The Khan's commitment to the imperial vision is absolute, but it does mean that he reserves the right to question orders, to interpret doctrine according to his own judgment, to pursue objectives in ways that others might consider unorthodox. He expects the same independent thinking from his warriors. A White Scars captain who blindly follows orders without considering their wisdom is not fulfilling his duty. He is abdicating it. Each warrior must be capable of acting autonomously, making decisions in the heat of battle based on the situation rather than slavish adherence to predetermined plans. The third principle is brotherhood. The brotherhoods are not merely organizational units. They are families, bound together by ties stronger than blood. Warriors within a brotherhood trust each other implicitly, fight for each other without hesitation, die for each other without complaint. This brotherhood extends upward to the legion as a whole and outward to the imperium they serve. But its foundation lies in the personal relationships between warriors who have bled together across countless battlefields. The fourth principle is honor. Not the rigid formal honor of codes and laws, but the living honor of a warrior who knows his own worth and refuses to diminish it through unworthy actions. A White Scar fights fairly when fighting fairly is possible, shows mercy when mercy is deserved, speaks truth even when lies would be easier. But honor does not require stupidity. There is no dishonor in cunning, no shame in tactical retreats, no disgrace in using every advantage available to achieve victory. The fifth principle is joy. This is perhaps the most surprising element of White Scar's philosophy, given the grim nature of their work. But Jaghatai teaches that warfare, for all its horror, can also be a source of genuine pleasure. The rush of speed, the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of a well-executed maneuver. These are legitimate sources of happiness that warriors should embrace rather than suppress. A White Scar who does not enjoy his work is doing something wrong. These principles combine to create a legion culture unlike any other in the Imperium. The White Scars are fierce warriors, but also poets and philosophers. They fight with savage efficiency, but also with something that looks almost like laughter. They obey orders, but never without thought. They are loyal, but never servile. The Stormseers embody this unique culture in their role as the Legion's spiritual guides. Unlike the librarians of other legions, who are often viewed with suspicion or fear, the Stormseers are integral to White Scar's identity. They are not specialists kept separate from the main force, but full members of their brotherhoods, fighting alongside their brothers while also providing psychic support and spiritual guidance. Their approach to the war differs fundamentally from the imperial orthodoxy, where the Emperor's edicts treat psychic powers as dangerous tools to be carefully controlled. The Stormseers view them as natural extensions of the soul, no more inherently dangerous than any other form of strength. They speak of riding the currents of the immaterium rather than forcing their way through, of harmonizing with the warp's energies rather than dominating them. This perspective brings them into occasional conflict with other imperial institutions, particularly after the Council of Nicaea formally bans the use of psychic powers within the legions. Jaghatai's response to the edict is characteristic. Formal acknowledgement of the Emperor's authority, combined with practical interpretation that allows the Stormseers to continue their work in less overt ways. The Khan does not openly defy the ruling, but neither does he enforce it with the zealotry that some of his brothers display. The resulting tension reflects a broader truth about the White Scar's place within the Imperium. They serve loyally, but they serve as themselves, not as the interchangeable cogs that some visions of the Great Crusade seem to require. Their identity as sons of Chagoris remains strong even as they fight across the galaxy, their traditions maintained even as they adopt new weapons and tactics. When the heresy comes, this independence will prove crucial. The White Scars do not fall to chaos partly because they never completely surrendered themselves to any external authority, not even the emperors. They serve because they choose to serve, not because they have forgotten how to choose. And when the time comes to make the ultimate choice, they choose loyalty, not through blind obedience, but through reasoned conviction. The final battle of the Kondax campaign unfolds with the bloody efficiency that has become the White Scar's hallmark. Jaghatai leads the assault personally, his jet bike screaming across the greenskin positions at speeds that turn even Orc sluggerfire into a futile gesture. Behind him, the Brotherhood strike in coordinated waves, each unit knowing its role in the larger dance of destruction. The Orc war boss, a massive creature whose name translates roughly to Skull Taker who drinks worlds, attempts to turn the battle into the grinding melee that favors greenskin forces. He gathers his biggest warriors around him and charges directly at Jaghatai's command element, bellowing challenges that echo across the battlefield. It is a sound meant to inspire fear, to draw enemies into single combat where Orc strength can prevail. Jaghatai denies him the satisfaction. The Khan's forces part like water before the Orc charge, flowing around the greenskin formation rather than meeting it head-on. Strike squads on jet bikes rake the flanks of the Orc advance, their bolt weapons tearing chunks from the greenskin horde. Meanwhile, Jaghatai himself circles behind the enemy, his blade harvesting lesser Orcs as he works his way toward the war boss when they finally clash. It is not the glorious duel that the Orc anticipated. Jaghatai strikes from behind, his power glaive taking the war boss's head before the creature can turn to face him. It is not honorable by Orc standards, but the Khan has never subscribed to the greenskin code of combat. Victory matters. Method is merely detail. With their leader dead, the Orc resistance collapses into the chaos that always follows greenskin defeats. The surviving warbands scatter, pursued by White Scar's hunting packs, who run them down across days of relentless pursuit. The Kondax system is finally secured, its Orc infestation reduced to scattered remnants that pose no further strategic threat. Jaghatai should feel satisfaction at this accomplishment. Instead, he feels only urgency. The silence from the wider Imperium has grown oppressive during the campaign's final stages. Messages sent to Terra go unanswered. Requests for information from other Legion deployments receive only confused or contradictory replies. Something is wrong on a scale that the Khan cannot yet comprehend, and every instinct he possesses screams at him to investigate. He orders the Legion to make ready for immediate departure, leaving only minimal garrison forces to maintain the Kondax compliance. His destination is Terra itself. If the Imperium's leadership has fallen silent, he will seek answers at its heart. The answer arrives before he can leave. Ships emerge from the warp at the edge of the Kondax system, their IFF transponders identifying them as members of the Alpha Legion. Jaghatai knows little of Alpharius and his secretive warriors, though what he knows does not inspire trust. The Alpha Legion has always been the most enigmatic of his brother's forces, their methods opaque and their loyalties questionable. The vessel's commander requests parley, claiming to carry urgent news from Terra. Against the counsel of some of his advisors, Jaghatai agrees to receive the Alpha Legion delegation. Whatever is happening in the Imperium, he needs information, and this may be his best opportunity to acquire it. What the Alpha Legion brings is poison. The delegation, led by a captain whose name and face seem to shift subtly every time Jaghatai looks at him, presents a carefully constructed narrative. Horus has rebelled against the Emperor, they claim. leading fully half the legions into treachery. Terror is besieged. The loyal legions are scattered and fighting for survival. But there is hope. Certain of the remaining Primarchs are gathering their forces to strike at the traitors, and they seek Jaghatai's allegiance. The implication is clear: join the rebellion or be destroyed. But the Alpha Legion story contains inconsistencies that trigger every suspicious instinct Jaghatai possesses. Details contradict each other between speakers. The timeline of events makes no military sense, and underlying it all is a sense of wrongness, a feeling that this elaborate presentation is a trap rather than an honest offer. Jaghatai plays along, neither accepting nor refusing, buying time while his Stormseers reach out through the warp for confirmation or denial of these claims. What they find is chaos. The Immaterium roils with energies that make clear reading impossible, but fragments of truth emerge through the psychic static. There's indeed been a rebellion. Brother has turned against brother, but who has betrayed whom remains unclear. The Alpha Legion grows impatient with Jaghatai's hedging. Their offers become threats, their requests become demands. They have brought significant naval forces to the Kondak system, sufficient to engage the White Scar's fleet in a battle that would cripple both forces regardless of outcome. The trap becomes apparent. Jaghatai was meant to be presented with a rebellion as the only logical choice, boxed in by circumstance and force. The Khan has never responded well to being boxed in. What follows becomes known as the Battle of the Catalyst Belt, a brutal void engagement fought among the asteroids and debris fields of the system's outer reaches. The Alpha Legion forces, expecting either compliance or a defensive stand, are caught off guard when Jaghatai orders an immediate attack. The White Scars strike with the same lightning ferocity they bring to planetary warfare, their vessels weaving through the asteroid field at speeds that should be suicidal while pouring fire into the Alpha Legion fleet. The battle lasts for 17 hours, a running engagement that sees both forces trading blows across billions of kilometers of space. The Alpha Legion proves as devious in void combat as they are in all other endeavors, employing tricks and feints that claim several White Scars vessels. But Jaghatai has spent his entire existence fighting against superior numbers through superior mobility, and the asteroid field provides the kind of complex terrain that favors his warrior skills. When the Alpha Legion finally withdraws, they leave behind the shattered hulks of a third of their fleet. The White Scars have paid a price as well. Ships lost, warriors dead, a chapter's worth of legionaries who will never ride to war again. But they have broken free of the trap, and more importantly, they have confirmed a terrible truth. Horus has betrayed the Emperor. The galaxy is at war, and Jaghatai Khan must choose his side. The choice is not as simple as it might appear. Jaghatai has always been apart from his brothers, neither fully embracing the imperial cause nor rebelling against it. He has questioned the Crusade's methods, doubted its ultimate purpose, wondered whether the unity it imposes is worth the freedom it destroys. In the dark watches of the night, he has imagined other possibilities, a galaxy where humanity spreads among the stars without a single throne to rule it all, where cultures flourish in their diversity rather than being ground into imperial conformity. The rebellion offers a chance to make those imaginings real. Horus's vision, as the Alpha Legion described it, promises liberation from the Emperor's restrictive edicts. The Nicaea ruling that silenced the Legion's psychers would be overturned. The rigid hierarchy that places terror at the center of all things would be dismantled. The legions would be free to pursue their own destinies, unshackled from the Emperor's grand design. It is a seductive offer, and part of Jaghatai finds himself drawn to it. But another part, deeper and more fundamental, recoils in recognition of the lie. The Khan has spent his life reading enemies, understanding their motivations, predicting their actions. He applies that same insight to the choice before him now, examining the rebellion not as a participant, but as an analyst. And what he sees does not match the words the Alpha Legion spoke. Horus's allies include Lorgar, whose desire to worship the Emperor as a god was crushed at Monarchia. They include Mortarion, whose hatred of Psychers should make him the last to embrace a rebellion that promises to unleash psychic powers. They include Angron, whose rage has never been about philosophy or governance, but simply destruction for its own sake. These are not liberators seeking to free humanity from tyranny. These are broken beings seeking revenge for wounds they cannot forgive. And behind them all, Jaghatai senses something else, something older and darker. Forces that have manipulated events to bring the Imperium to this crisis. The warp is not simply a phenomenon to be studied or utilized. It contains intelligences of its own, entities that hunger for mortal souls and delight in mortal suffering. The rebellion carries their taint, regardless of what its mortal participants believe. The Khan makes his choice. He will remain loyal to the Emperor, not because he believes the Imperium is perfect or that the Emperor is worthy of worship, but because the alternative is worse. Whatever his doubts about the Crusade's methods, Jaghatai cannot ally himself with chaos. He has seen what the worship of dark powers does to men, has witnessed the corruption that spreads from those who traffic with entities of the warp. To join Horus's rebellion would be to embrace that corruption, to become something less than human in pursuit of power that always demands more than it gives. But loyalty does not mean blind obedience. Jaghatai charts a course for terror, knowing that the journey will take him through space contested by traitor forces. He could attempt to avoid the fighting, to slip through the gaps in the enemy's deployments and reach the throne world without engaging the rebels. Other legions might make that choice, preserving their strength for the final defense. The Khan has never been one for passive approaches. The white scars cut a swathe across the Imperium, striking at traitor positions wherever they find them. Jaghatai targets supply lines and communication nodes, the soft underbelly of Horus's logistics network. He's not trying to defeat the rebellion through direct confrontation. His forces are too few for that, but rather to disrupt and delay, to force the traitors to divert resources from their advance on Terra. The Death Guard become a particular focus of his attention. Mortarion's legion has deployed across the approaches to Terra, their advance methodical and inexorable, grinding down resistance world by world. Jaghatai's forces harry them relentlessly, appearing without warning to strike at vulnerable points before vanishing back into the void. The two Primarchs meet in person only once during this campaign, on a world whose name has been lost to history. The Death Guard have established a forward base there, a logistics hub for their advance, and Jaghatai leads a strike force to destroy it. Mortarion himself commands the defense, his massive scythe reaping white scars warriors with every swing. When the two brothers finally face each other, the battle around them seems to fade into insignificance. Here stand two gods of war, their philosophies opposed, their loyalties diverged. Mortarion speaks of freedom from the Emperor's tyranny, of a galaxy unshackled from the rule of a distant throne. Jaghatai responds that trading one tyrant for the Chaos Gods is no freedom at all, only a different kind of slavery. Their duel is brief but savage. Power glaive meeting demon touch scythe in exchanges that shatter the ground beneath their feet. Neither gains a decisive advantage. They are too evenly matched, their skills too comparable. When the White Scar's extraction forces arrive, Jaghatai breaks off the engagement, his objective accomplished even if the personal battle remains unresolved. He leaves Mortarion with a promise. They will meet again, and next time, one of them will not walk away. The journey to Terra continues through increasingly desperate circumstances. The warp grows more turbulent as the legions tear at each other. The psychic screams of dying worlds and dying warriors feeding something vast and hungry in the immaterium. Navigation becomes treacherous, with journeys that should take weeks stretching into months, as the White Scar's vessels fight against currents that seem actively malevolent. Jaghatai uses the time to prepare his legion for the battle ahead. He knows that Terra will be the decisive engagement, the confrontation that determines the fate of the Imperium. The White Scars must be ready to contribute everything they have to that defense. He also struggles with his own demons. The Storm Seers bring him reports of what the warp reveals, visions of possible futures, each more terrible than the last. In some, the Emperor falls and Horus claims the throne, beginning a reign of darkness that consumes humanity utterly. In others, the rebels are defeated, but the cost breaks the Imperium beyond repair, leaving only ashes where civilization once stood. In all of them, brother kills brother, sons die before fathers, and the light of humanity flickers toward extinction. Jaghatai does not put great stock in prophecy. The future is written by those with the will to write it, but the visions trouble him nonetheless. He has always valued his independence, his ability to chart his own course through whatever circumstances presented themselves. Now he finds himself caught in currents beyond his control, swept toward a destination that may consume everything he has built. The only choice remaining is how to face that destiny. As a slave to fate, or as a free man who makes his own meaning from the chaos around him. He chooses freedom, as he has always chosen freedom. When the White Scars finally break through the traitor blockades and reach the Sol system, terror burns beneath them. The siege has already begun, Horus's forces investing the Imperial Palace, while the loyalist defenders fight with desperate courage against overwhelming odds. Jaghatai has arrived too late to prevent the catastrophe, but not too late to influence its outcome. The Khan leads his legion into battle with a howl that echoes across the void, a steppe warrior's war cry amplified to shake the foundations of reality itself. The White Scars descend upon the traitor fleet like wolves upon sheep, their ships weaving between enemy formations with the same deadly grace their riders show on planetary surfaces. Terror awaits them, burning but unbowed, and Jaghatai Khan has promises to keep. The journey toward Terror takes the White Scars through realms where reality itself becomes uncertain. The warp, always dangerous, has grown actively hostile since the heresy began. The psychic screams of dying worlds and dying legions feeding something vast and hungry in the immaterium. Navigation becomes treacherous, with journeys that should take weeks stretching into months, as the White Scars' vessels fight against currents that seem to possess malevolent intent. During this journey, the Legion encounters one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets, the Dark Glass. The installation floats in the void of a dead system, its exact location known only to a handful of Imperial officials. From the outside, it appears to be nothing more than a large space station, unremarkable except for the unusually heavy defensive installations that surround it. But within its hull lies something that changes everything Jaghatai thought he knew about the Emperor's true plans. The dark glass is a webway portal, not the damaged, corrupted gate that Magnus's folly opened beneath the Imperial Palace, but a deliberately constructed entrance to the labyrinthine dimension that the Eldar use for faster-than-light travel. The Emperor has been working for centuries to create a human-accessible webway, a network of passages that would allow humanity to travel the stars without exposure to the warp and the predatory entities that dwell within it. This discovery forces Jaghatai to reconsider many of his assumptions about the Crusade and its ultimate purpose. The Emperor's goal was never simply conquest. It was the creation of a new order that would make humanity independent of the warp entirely. The Great Crusade was always a means to an end, a necessary prelude to a transformation that would have fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with the galaxy. But Magnus's well-intentioned warning, his psychic message that tore through the palace's wards and shattered the Webway project, has doomed this vision. The gate beneath Terra is irreparably damaged, requiring the Emperor's constant attention to prevent it from becoming a doorway for demonic invasion. The network that might have united humanity across the stars will never be completed. The dark glass offers an alternative, albeit a limited one. The portal remains functional, providing access to portions of the webway that the Eldar have abandoned or never fully developed. It cannot replace what was lost beneath Terra, but it offers possibilities that Jaghatai immediately recognizes. The Khan spends days studying the installation, his storm seers probing its mechanisms with careful psychic investigation. What they learn confirms his suspicions. The webway is not simply a transportation network, but a dimension unto itself, a realm between real space and the warp where different rules apply. Travel through the webway is faster than conventional warp translation, and crucially, safer. The passages are shielded from the predatory attention of chaos entities. This knowledge will prove vital in the years to come, though Jaghatai cannot yet know exactly how. The White Scars continue their journey toward Terra, but the Khan carries the secret of the dark glass with him. He does not share it widely. Such information could be dangerous in the wrong hands, but he ensures that the location and basic operating principles are recorded and preserved among his most trusted commanders. When the siege of Terra begins, when the final battle for humanity's soul is joined, Jaghatai Khan will fight with knowledge that most of his brothers lack. The webway is not lost, not entirely. There are still doors between dimensions that can be opened by those who know how to find them. This knowledge will shape his final choice when the time comes to make it. The Imperial Palace defies description. The greatest fortress ever constructed by human hands sprawls across entire continents of Terra, its walls rising kilometers into the poison sky, its defenses representing 10,000 years of accumulated military engineering. Rogel Dawn spent decades preparing this citadel for exactly this moment, layering defense upon defense, trap upon trap, creating a killing ground that should be impregnable to any conventional assault. Horus brings nothing conventional. The traitor forces have invested the palace for weeks before Jaghatai's arrival. their armies grinding against the outer defenses in a siege of unimaginable scale. Millions of mortal soldiers die each day in the fighting, their bodies piling so high that some assault ramps are built from nothing but corpses. Titans duel among the shattered spires, god machines trading blows that level city blocks with every exchange. And through it all, the forces of chaos pour their corruption across Terra's tortured surface, reality itself fraying under the weight of so much concentrated malevolence. Jaghatai takes in this panorama of destruction from the bridge of his flagship as the white scars approach the battleground. The scale of it exceeds anything he witnessed during the Great Crusade. Wars that once seemed apocalyptic, now revealed as mere skirmishes compared to this final reckoning. He feels something he rarely experiences: genuine awe at the forces arrayed against humanity's survival. But he does not feel despair. The Khan is a warrior. He has spent his existence confronting enemies that should be beyond his ability to defeat, and he has prevailed through speed and cunning and an absolute refusal to accept that any battle is unwinnable. The siege of Terra is no different, merely larger. His fleet breaks through the traitor blockade in a series of running engagements that demonstrate why the White Scars are feared across the galaxy. Where other vessels would attempt to punch through enemy lines with main batteries blazing, Jaghatai's ships weave and feint, drawing traitor squadrons out of position before slipping through the gaps that open. The losses are lighter than they have any right to be, and when the White Scars make planetfall, they do so with most of their strength intact. Jaghatai is reunited with his loyal brothers in the great command chamber beneath the Eternity Gate. Rogel Dawn has aged visibly since they last met, the stress of command etching lines into features that should be immortal. The Praetorian of Terror carries the defense of humanity on his shoulders, and the weight shows in every movement. He greets Jaghatai with a warrior's embrace, honest relief showing through his customary stoicism. Sanguinius stands nearby, his white wings folded against his back, his beautiful features composed into an expression of terrible serenity. The angel has foreseen his own death in this battle, a prophecy that he has shared with no one, but that shows in the way he moves, the acceptance that underlies his every action. He welcomes Jaghatai with genuine warmth, though something in his eyes speaks of farewells. The Khan also meets the other commanders who have gathered for Terra's defense. Constantine Valdor of the Custodians, whose golden warriors hold the inner sanctums of the palace. Genetia Kroll of the Sisters of Silence, whose null maidens are among the few effective counters to the demonic forces arrayed against them. Malcador, the Sigillite, the Emperor's oldest advisor, whose frail appearance belies power and knowledge accumulated across millennia, and the Emperor himself, though he remains sequestered within the inner palace, fighting his own battle against the darkness that seeks to claim Terra through the damaged webway portal. The strategic situation is grim, but not hopeless. The palace's outer defenses have been breached in several locations, but the inner walls still hold. The traitor forces have suffered appalling casualties in their assaults, losses that even their demon-enhanced numbers cannot sustain indefinitely. If the defenders can hold long enough, if relief forces can arrive from the scattered loyal legions, if the traitors' unity can be fractured, any number of possible paths to victory remain open. Dawn outlines his defensive strategy, a methodical approach focused on holding key positions and making the enemy pay for every meter of ground. It is sound planning, the work of a master of fortification, and Jaghatai finds no fault in its logic, but he offers something different. The White Scars are not built for static defense. Their strength lies in movement, in striking where enemies do not expect them, in keeping adversaries off balance through constant pressure. Jaghatai proposes that rather than committing his legion to the walls, he be allowed to serve as a mobile reserve, a fast reaction force that can respond to threats across the entire battlefront. More than that, he proposes taking the fight to the enemy. The traitors have grown accustomed to the defenders' passive stance, expecting the loyalists to simply absorb their assaults and wait for attrition to decide the battle. Jaghatai suggests disrupting that expectation, launching sudden counterattacks that reclaim lost ground and destroy enemy resources. The risks are significant. Forces committed to offensive operations cannot simultaneously defend static positions, but the potential rewards include breaking the traitor's momentum and buying time for reinforcements to arrive. Dawn is skeptical, his defensive mindset resistant to what seems like unnecessary gambling. But Sanguinius supports the plan, recognizing in it a chance to transform the battle from a siege into a campaign of maneuver. After considerable debate, a compromise is reached. Jaghatai will have his mobile reserve, but he must coordinate his operations with the overall defense. The Khan accepts these terms, though both he and Dawn know that once battle is joined, coordination will become difficult at best. What matters is that the White Scars will fight as they were meant to fight. Swift, aggressive, and unpredictable. The first test comes within days. The Lionsgate spaceport represents one of Terra's most vital strategic assets, a massive complex capable of receiving orbital traffic at a scale that no other landing zone can match. When it falls to the traitors early in the siege, captured through a combination of treachery and overwhelming force, the loss threatens to doom the entire defense. Without the spaceport, reinforcements cannot reach Terra in meaningful numbers. The siege becomes merely a matter of time. Conventional military wisdom says the spaceport is lost beyond recovery. The traitors have fortified it extensively, pouring in Iron Warriors, Engineers, and World Eaters Berserkers to hold against any counterattack. The forces required to retake it through direct assault would strip the walls of defenders and invite breakthrough elsewhere. Jaghatai proposes something unconventional. Operation Dawn calls for committing nearly the entire White Scars Legion to a single, concentrated strike against Lionsgate. Rather than the methodical advance that conventional doctrine demands, the assault will be a lightning raid on the largest possible scale. Multiple simultaneous strikes from unexpected vectors, overwhelming the defenders through speed and shock rather than raw firepower. It is perhaps the most audacious tactical plan of the entire siege. Rogel Dawn expresses severe reservations, pointing out that failure would effectively destroy the White Scars as a fighting force and leave a massive gap in the defense. Sanguinius voices similar concerns, though his are more personal. He fears for his brother's life in such a dangerous operation. Jaghatai's response encapsulates his philosophy of warfare. He speaks of the steppe, where a wall might stand for 10,000 years, but a sword stroke can change history in a heartbeat. He argues that defense alone cannot win this battle, that unless the loyalists seize the initiative, they will simply be ground down by enemies willing to accept any cost for victory. In the end, his brothers agree to the plan, perhaps recognizing that the Khan will pursue it with or without their blessing. The assault launches at 3 in the morning, Terran Standard Time. deliberately timed to coincide with the Death Guard's lowest activity cycle. The White Scars attack as dozens of smaller strike elements, each targeting specific objectives according to a precisely coordinated timetable. There is no massed formation, no obvious spearhead that defenders can focus their response upon. Instead, there is chaos, controlled chaos, chaos with purpose, but chaos nonetheless. The Legion's jet bike squadrons lead the assault, their speed allowing them to bypass established defensive lines and strike directly at command and control nodes. These lightning attacks throw the traitor garrison into confusion, commanders suddenly unable to coordinate their forces as their communications go dark. Supporting these spearhead elements come the Legion's heavy armor, Stormbird assault carriers that deliver Terminator armored veterans directly into critical choke points. These warriors fight to hold positions for mere minutes, long enough for following waves to exploit the openings they create. It is a doctrine of constant movement, of never remaining in one place long enough for the enemy to respond effectively. Jaghatai himself leads from the front, as he has always led. His jet bike screams across the spaceport's defense grid at speeds that should be impossible. His power glaive harvesting traitor warriors with every pass. He does not seek out enemy commanders for formal duels. Such concerns are for those with time to spare. Instead, he strikes wherever his presence can tip a local engagement, then moves on before the enemy can adapt to his location. The battle becomes a blur of speed and violence, individual actions merging into a greater whole that no single observer could fully comprehend. White Scars warriors die by the hundreds, their sacrifice buying seconds and meters that accumulate into the larger victory. Traitor forces fall by the thousands, their static defenses useless against enemies who refuse to cooperate with their tactical expectations. Within 6 hours, White Scars forces have secured the spaceport's primary control chambers. The fighting continues for hours more as the last pockets of traitor resistance are reduced, but the outcome is no longer in doubt. By dawn, giving the operation its name, the White Scars banner flies from Lionsgate's highest spire. The spaceport is once again in Loyalist hands. The cost has been significant. Thousands of White Scars warriors have fallen, their bodies scattered across the spaceport's blood-soaked ferrocrete. Jaghatai himself bears wounds that would have killed a lesser being, though his superhuman physiology is already knitting the damage back together. The Legion that lands at Lionsgate is noticeably smaller than the one that attacked, but the victory's strategic value exceeds any calculation of casualties. The defenders now have a functional landing zone for reinforcements. The traitors' timetable has been disrupted, their supply lines threatened, their assumption of inevitable victory challenged. For the first time since the siege began, the initiative has shifted, however briefly, to the Loyalists. Horus does not take the defeat lightly. The aftermath of Operation Dawn reveals the true price of victory in the heresy. The White Scars gather their dead in the hours after the spaceport's recapture. The ancient Chagorian ritual of sky burial, impossible in Terra's tortured atmosphere. Instead, the fallen are committed to the flames of makeshift pyres, their ashes scattered across the ferrocrete that they died to reclaim. Jaghatai presides over the ceremonies personally, speaking the names of the dead as the fires consume their bodies. Among the fallen are warriors who rode with the Khan since Chagoris, veterans who remember the unification campaigns and the early years of the Crusade. They are irreplaceable in ways that transcend mere military capability. Each death severs a connection to the past, breaks a link in the chain of tradition that stretches back to the steppes. The Legion has lost nearly 2,000 warriors in the operation, a significant portion of their remaining strength. These are not losses that can be replaced quickly. The process of creating a Space Marine requires years, and the White Scar's recruiting worlds are far from Terra. The warriors who fall in this siege will not be replaced for generations. Jaghatai accepts this reality with the stoicism that defines his character. He has never been one to count costs before acting or to mourn losses that serve a greater purpose. The recapture of Lionsgate was necessary. Therefore, the price was worth paying. To think otherwise would dishonor those who died achieving it. But the knowledge weighs on him nonetheless. Each warrior who falls is a son lost, a bond broken, a voice silenced that will never speak again. The great Khan has spent his existence building his confederation on Chogoris, building his legion during the crusade, building the defense of Terra during this desperate siege. Now he watches as his life's work is slowly consumed by the fires of war. The traitors have suffered greater losses, of course. The assault on Lionsgate cost Horus thousands of his own warriors, resources he can ill afford to expend. The strategic balance has shifted, however slightly, in the defenders' favor. But Jaghatai takes no satisfaction in enemy casualties that do nothing to restore his own. The siege continues in the days after Operation Dawn, but the character of the fighting changes. Horus recognizes that the Khan's mobile forces pose a threat that must be neutralized, and he commits additional resources to pinning the White Scars in place. Death Guard formations advance methodically toward positions where Jaghatai's warriors have been operating, their inexorable progress designed to compress the space in which the 5th Legion can maneuver. Mortarion himself coordinates this effort, his hatred for Jaghatai now openly acknowledged. The two Primarchs have become personal enemies, their rivalry transcending the larger conflict between traitors and loyalists. Each seeks the other's destruction with an intensity that sometimes interferes with sound tactical judgment. Their confrontations grow more frequent and more vicious as the siege progresses. Jaghatai kills hundreds of Death Guard warriors in the constant skirmishing, his blade reaping a harvest that would make lesser commanders blanch, but the Death Guard seem endless, their numbers replenished by reinforcements from the warp, their fallen warriors sometimes rising again as corrupted mockeries of their former selves. The full extent of Mortarion's bargain with the Chaos Gods becomes apparent during these encounters. The Death Guard are no longer merely Space Marines who have turned traitor. They are becoming something else entirely. Vessels for demonic power that makes them resistant to damage that would destroy ordinary Astartes. Wounds that should be fatal heal within seconds. Warriors who should be dead continue fighting, their bodies animated by forces that have nothing to do with their original physiology. Jaghatai recognizes the corruption for what it is and responds accordingly. He instructs his Stormseers to develop countermeasures against the demonic taint, psychic techniques that can disrupt the connection between chaos and its servants. These methods prove effective but exhausting, draining the psychers who employ them of vital energy. The war becomes a battle of attrition in which both sides know that time favors different outcomes. The traitors need to break through the palace defenses before loyalist reinforcements arrive. The defenders need to hold long enough for those reinforcements to make a difference. Every day that passes without a decisive traitor breakthrough is a victory for the Imperium. Every day that passes without external relief brings the defenders closer to exhaustion. Jaghatai fights on, as he has always fought, but the certainty that once characterized his campaigns is gone. He no longer knows if victory is possible, only that defeat is unacceptable. He fights because fighting is what he does, because the alternative, surrender, despair, the abandonment of everything he has built, is more terrible than any death. The siege grinds on toward its conclusion, and the great Khan rides to meet whatever fate awaits him. The recapture of Lion's Gate marks a turning point in the siege, but not the end of it. The traitors respond to the setback with renewed fury, pouring forces into assaults that threaten to overwhelm the defenders' stretched lines. Jaghatai finds himself fighting constantly, his white scars committed to a dozen different engagements across the palace's vast perimeter. He refuses to be tied down to static defense. The Khan implements a doctrine that his warriors come to call the Warhawk's Hunt, a continuous series of rapid response operations that see White Scar's forces racing from crisis to crisis across the battlefield. When traitor forces achieve a breakthrough, Jaghatai's warriors are there to blunt the advance. When loyalist positions teeter on the edge of collapse, the White Scars arrive to stabilize the line. When enemy formations mass for major assaults, lightning raids strike at their flanks and rear. The Legion operates at a tempo that would destroy conventional forces. Warriors fight for hours, snatch moments of rest aboard their transports, then deploy again before their wounds have fully healed. Support systems strain past their design limits, repair crews working around the clock to keep vehicles and equipment functional. The White Scars are burning themselves out, but they are buying something precious in exchange: time. Mortarion recognizes the threat that Jaghatai poses and commits Death Guard forces to neutralize him. The Pale Legion advances methodically toward White Scar's positions, their inexorable approach designed to pin Jaghatai in place and strip away his mobility advantages. Mortarion himself leads the hunt, his hatred for the Khan having grown personal since their last encounter. The two Primarchs clash repeatedly during this phase of the siege, brief but savage engagements that see their forces tearing into each other across Terra's ruined landscape. Neither can land a decisive blow. Jaghatai's speed allows him to disengage before Mortarion can bring his full force to bear, while Mortarion's resilience means that even significant damage fails to slow his advance. Their rivalry takes on symbolic dimensions that transcend the tactical situation. Jaghatai represents everything Mortarion hates: a psycho-tolerant approach to warfare, a philosophy that values individual freedom over collective purpose, a refusal to accept the grinding attrition that defines Death Guard doctrine. Mortarion represents everything Jaghatai fears: the surrender of autonomy to external powers, the embrace of corruption as strength, the transformation of warrior discipline into something darker. The greatest confrontation between them comes in the ruins of what was once a residential district. Tens of millions of civilian inhabitants long since evacuated or killed. Mortarion has finally maneuvered his forces into a position that denies Jaghatai easy escape, his Death Guard forming a cordon that seems to offer no gaps. The Khan responds by creating his own gaps. He orders his forces to attack directly through the Death Guard lines, accepting casualties that his usual doctrine would avoid in exchange for the chance to break free of encirclement. The fighting is horrific. White Scar's warriors falling by the score as they punch through enemies whose resilience seems supernatural. Mortarion's corruption has progressed significantly since their last meeting, his warriors exhibiting signs of chaos taint that manifest as impossible endurance and disturbing physical mutations. Jaghatai and Mortarion duel amid the carnage, their confrontation this time lasting longer than previous encounters. The Death Lord's scythe and the Khan's glaive meet in exchanges that crack the ground beneath them, each blow capable of slaying lesser beings outright. They speak as they fight, not in the formal challenges of traditional single combat, but in the savage exchange of accusation and counter-accusation. Mortarion proclaims the inevitability of Horus's victory, of the new order that will rise from the ashes of the Emperor's failed dream. He offers Jaghatai one final chance to join the winning side, to embrace the freedom that rebellion offers. Jaghatai's response echoes across the battlefield. He speaks of true freedom versus the slavery that masquerades as liberation. He tells Mortarion that the Chaos Gods care nothing for their servants' ambitions, that all who kneel before them become puppets dancing on strings they cannot see. He promises that when this is over, when the traitors are driven back, he will ensure that Mortarion's name is remembered as a cautionary tale. The Primarch, who sold his soul for power and received only chains. Their duel ends inconclusively when White Scar's reinforcements arrive and force Mortarion to withdraw. But something has changed between them. The rivalry that began as professional opposition has become personal hatred, a wound that will not heal even across millennia. Jaghatai pulls his forces back to the palace, knowing that the next confrontation with Mortarion may well be the last for one of them. The siege enters its final phase as Horus commits his remaining reserves to an all-out assault on the palace. The Warmaster has grown impatient, sensing that time works against him as loyalist reinforcements draw ever closer to Terra. He abandons the methodical approach that characterized earlier fighting in favor of direct, overwhelming attacks that accept casualties as the price of victory. The defenders respond with desperate heroism, but they are being worn down. Each day sees their lines contract, their strength diminish, their hope flicker. The constant combat has exhausted even superhuman physiology, and mortal troops are dying faster than they can be replaced. Jaghatai fights on, but he recognizes the signs of impending defeat. The mathematical reality is stark. The traitors have more forces remaining than the loyalists can effectively oppose. Unless something changes, the palace will fall. The change comes from an unexpected direction. Throughout the siege, the Emperor has remained sequestered within the Sanctum Imperialis, his attention focused on the psychic battle being waged against the Dark Gods and the corrupted webway portal that threatens to tear reality apart beneath the palace. His absence from the physical fighting has been a constant source of concern for the defenders, who wonder if their lord has abandoned them. Now, suddenly, the Emperor stirs. The psychic shockwave that ripples out from the palace's heart is felt by every psyker on Terra and beyond. It carries no words, but its meaning is unmistakable. The master of mankind is rising to meet his enemies directly. The defenders feel their flagging spirits lift as the Emperor's power flows through them, lending strength to exhausted limbs and courage to faltering hearts. Jaghatai does not feel the Emperor's presence as strongly as some of his brothers. His psyker abilities have always been modest compared to the likes of Magnus or Lorgar. But he recognizes what this development means for the battle. The Emperor is committing himself to direct confrontation with Horus, abandoning the Golden Throne and the Webway project to meet his rebellious son face to face. Everything now depends on the outcome of that meeting. The Khan redoubles his efforts, knowing that he must buy time for the Emperor's confrontation with Horus to reach its conclusion. He throws his forces into attacks that push his doctrine of aggressive defense to its absolute limits, accepting casualties that he would never countenance under normal circumstances. The white scars bleed, but they do not break. The final assault on the vengeful spirit, the confrontation between the Emperor and Horus that will determine humanity's fate, unfolds beyond Jaghatai's direct involvement. He learns of it through fragmentary reports that arrive amid the confusion of battle. The Emperor has teleported aboard Horus's flagship with a strike force of custodians, blood angels, and imperial fists. Sanguinius has fallen, cut down by the War Master's hand. The Emperor himself is locked in combat with his most favored son. And then silence. For a moment that stretches like eternity, the entire battle seems to pause. Weapons fall silent. Warriors on both sides stop in mid-strike, their attention drawn towards something they cannot see, but somehow feel. The warp itself seems to hold its breath. When the moment passes, everything has changed. The psychic scream that erupts from the vengeful spirit carries the knowledge of Horus's death across the entire solar system. The War Master has fallen, struck down by the Emperor's hand after a confrontation whose details will be debated by scholars for millennia. The rebellion has lost its head, its driving purpose, its unifying will. The traitor forces begin to withdraw almost immediately, discipline collapsing into panic as warriors realize that their cause is lost. Jaghatai orders his white scars into pursuit, harrying the retreating enemy with the same relentless efficiency they brought to the Kondak's campaigns. The hunters have become the hunted, but the victory is hollow. Reports filter in from the palace. The Emperor has been mortally wounded in his battle with Horus. He lingers, sustained by technologies and psychic powers that defy understanding, but he will never walk among his people again. The Golden Throne, originally designed for an entirely different purpose, is being modified to preserve his life, or what remains of it, for an indefinite period. Jaghatai receives this news in the ruins of a traitor command post, his warriors regrouping around him after a successful attack. The weight of it settles onto his shoulders like a physical burden. They have won the battle, but lost something irreplaceable. The Imperium will endure, but the dream that drove it is dead. He looks up at the stars that are just becoming visible through Terra's tortured atmosphere, and for the first time since the rebellion began, he allows himself to feel the full weight of what has been lost. The last days of the siege blur together in a haze of exhaustion and desperation. The defenders fight without rest, their superhuman physiology pushed to absolute limits and beyond. Mortal troops die by the thousands, their bodies forming ramparts that Space Marines defend with the last of their strength. The palace burns around them. Millennia of accumulated history, consumed by fires that seem to burn with more than natural hunger. Jaghatai Khan fights in the forefront of every major engagement, his presence inspiring defenders who have every reason to despair. The great Khan has not slept in weeks, has not eaten in days, has sustained wounds that would have killed ordinary beings dozens of times over. His armor is a patchwork of repairs and replacements, the original plates long since destroyed by weapons that have struck him in more engagements than anyone can count. But he does not fall. He refuses to fall. The white scars have been reduced to a shadow of their former strength. The warriors who rode so confidently to Terra's defense now number in the hundreds rather than thousands, their losses in the siege exceeding anything they suffered during the crusade. Each brotherhood has been bled white, their rosters filled with the names of the dead, and yet they fight on. The sons of Chogoris do not know how to surrender, do not understand the concept of acceptable defeat. They follow their father into battle after battle, their faith in him unshaken despite the horrors that surround them. The final assault comes without warning, the traitors throwing everything they have left into a desperate push that threatens to overwhelm the palace's last defenses. Demon engines lumber through breached walls, their corrupted machine spirits howling with hunger for mortal souls. Possessed warriors charge in waves that seem endless, their human host long since consumed by the entities that animate their flesh. Jaghatai rides to meet them with the remnants of his legion at his back. The battle that follows defies coherent description, a maelstrom of violence in which individual actions merge into a greater chaos that no observer could fully comprehend. The Khan's blade rises and falls in patterns that have become instinctive through a lifetime of practice, each stroke claiming enemies who dissolve into warp fire as the demonic energies sustaining them are disrupted. He finds himself separated from his warriors in the battle's chaos, surrounded by enemies who recognize him and converge with murderous intent. For the first time since the siege began, Jaghatai faces the real possibility of death, not the glorious death of a warrior fallen in victory, but the ignominious end of being pulled down by creatures beneath his contempt. But death does not claim him. Something changes in the fabric of reality, a shockwave that rolls across the battlefield and seems to carry meaning beyond mere physical force. The demons around him scream and dissolve, their connection to the material world suddenly severed. The possessed warriors collapse as the entities animating them are torn away. The Emperor has struck down Horus. The news spreads across the battlefield with supernatural speed, carried by the same psychic shockwave that disrupted the demonic forces. The War Master is dead. The rebellion has lost its head. The siege of terror is over. Jaghatai allows himself a moment of something that might be relief before the weight of what comes next settles onto his shoulders. The battle is won, but the cost has been almost beyond bearing. The Imperium will survive, but it will never be the same. The dream that drove the crusade has died along with Horus, along with Sanguinius, along with the Emperor's ability to walk among his people. The great Khan looks across the ruins of what was once humanity's greatest fortress, and he understands that the war is over. Not just this war, but the war for the galaxy that began when the Emperor first set forth to reunite scattered humanity. That dream is dead. What rises from its ashes will be something different, something perhaps necessary, but certainly lesser. But there is still work to be done. The traitors must be pursued and punished. The Imperium must be rebuilt. The wounds that the heresy has inflicted must be tended, though some of them will never fully heal. Jaghatai Khan sheathes his blade and begins the long process of counting what remains. The years that follow the siege become known as the Great Scouring, a period of retribution and reconstruction that sees the loyalist forces hunting down the scattered remnants of Horus's rebellion. The traitor legions have fled into the Eye of Terror and other warp-haunted regions, their cohesion shattered, but their capacity for harm far from extinguished. Jaghatai leads his white scars in pursuit. The legion has been rebuilt during the immediate aftermath of the siege, their numbers swelling with new recruits from Chogoris and the assimilation of scattered warriors from devastated units. They are not yet at their pre-heresy strength. That will take centuries, but they are numerous enough to pursue an aggressive campaign against the fleeing traitors. The Khan's approach to the scouring reflects his personal philosophy, where some of his brothers focus on reclaiming lost territory or rebuilding shattered institutions. Jaghatai concerns himself primarily with hunting the enemy. He has scores to settle, wounds to avenge, and a burning desire to ensure that the traitors pay for what they have done. Mortarion becomes his particular obsession. The Death Guard have retreated into the warp, their corruption now complete as Mortarion accepts the final blessing of Nurgle and transforms into a demon Primarch. Reports filter back to the loyalists of the horror that the 14th Legion has become, walking plague carriers whose mere presence can depopulate worlds, warriors who cannot truly die because their patron god preserves them in states of endless decay. Jaghatai pursues them across the galaxy and into the Eye of Terror itself, leading his White Scars through regions where reality frays and the laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules. The hunting is difficult and dangerous, but the Khan's forces prove better suited to it than most. Their speed allows them to strike and withdraw before the enemy can bring overwhelming force to bear, while their experience with the warp through the Stormseer tradition provides some protection against the more insidious forms of corruption. They fight hundreds of engagements during the Scouring years, raids and skirmishes and running battles that claim thousands of lives on both sides. Jaghatai never manages to bring Mortarion to final battle, the Daemon Primarch always slipping away at the crucial moment, but he inflicts enough damage on the Death Guard to slow their recovery for centuries. The hunting takes its toll on the Khan himself. The endless pursuit, the constant war, the grinding reality of fighting enemies who cannot truly be destroyed, all of it wears at him in ways that mere physical combat never could. He begins to spend more time alone, withdrawing from the company of his warriors to contemplate questions that have no satisfying answers. What is the point of victory when the thing you were fighting for has already been lost? What remains of the Emperor's dream now that the Emperor himself sits entombed on the golden throne, more corpse than man? What purpose can the Legion serve when the crusade that justified their existence is over? These questions plague Jaghatai throughout the Scouring, though he never allows them to interfere with his duty. He fights because fighting is what he was made for, hunts because hunting is what he has always done. But the joy that once accompanied the chase has faded, replaced by grim determination and a sense of obligation that provides no satisfaction. His brothers notice the change. Rogel Dawn, consumed by his own guilt over failing to protect the Emperor, barely speaks to anyone during these years. Robert Gilliman throws himself into the task of rebuilding the Imperium, crafting the Codex Astartes, and reorganizing the shattered institutions of government. The Lion disappears into the rock, the Dark Angel's fortress monastery, and will not emerge again. Leman Russ vanishes into the Eye of Terror on a quest whose purpose he shares with no one. One by one, the Primarchs remove themselves from the stage, each dealing with the aftermath of the heresy in their own way. Jaghatai watches his brothers depart and wonders when his own time will come. The answer arrives in the form of a Dark Eldar raid. The centuries that follow the heresy see Jaghatai Khan transformed from a warrior leading campaigns to a hunter pursuing vengeance across the galaxy. The distinction might seem subtle, but it reflects a fundamental change in the Great Khan's relationship with warfare. During the Crusade, he fought to build something, to expand the Imperium, to bring new worlds into compliance, to advance the Emperor's vision of united humanity. During the heresy, he fought to preserve something, to defend Terra, to protect the Emperor, to ensure that the traitor's victory would not be complete. Now he fights to destroy something, to hunt down the traitors who escaped into the Eye of Terror, to punish those who betrayed everything the Crusade represented, to ensure that the galaxy never forgets the cost of treachery. This shift in purpose affects everything about how the White Scars operate. They become more aggressive, more willing to take risks, more focused on immediate results than long-term strategic considerations. The careful balance between offense and defense that characterized their Crusade-era doctrine tilts decisively toward attack. Jaghatai leads from the front, as he has always led, but there is a darkness in his eyes now that was not there before. The joy that once accompanied warfare has faded, replaced by a cold determination that provides no satisfaction. He kills traitors by the thousand, but each death brings him no closer to whatever it is he truly seeks. Some among his sons worry that their Primarch is losing himself in the endless hunt, that the vengeance he pursues is consuming him rather than fulfilling him. The great Khan has always been apart from his brothers, but now the distance seems greater than ever. He speaks less, broods more, spends long hours alone in his quarters, contemplating questions that he shares with no one. The confrontations with Mortarion continue across this period, each encounter adding to the catalogue of wounds that the two Primarchs have inflicted upon each other. Neither can claim decisive victory, but neither is willing to abandon the pursuit. They've become mirrors of each other in some ways, both consumed by hatred, both transformed by the heresy into something darker than they were before. The galaxy around them changes as well. The Imperium rebuilds, but what emerges from the process is not what the Emperor intended. Robert Guilliman's Codex Astartes breaks the legions into chapters, limiting their power to prevent another heresy. The imperial cult transforms the Emperor from a living ruler into a divine figure, worshipped by trillions, who never knew him as anything but a golden icon. Jaghatai watches these developments with characteristic detachment. He does not oppose the changes. They are necessary, perhaps, given what the heresy revealed about the dangers of concentrated power. But neither does he embrace them. The White Scars comply with the Codex's requirements, reorganizing into chapter and successor formations, but they maintain their essential character throughout the transformation. The hunt continues, relentless and eternal, claiming years that stretch into decades that stretch into centuries. The great Khan grows no older. His superhuman physiology ensures that time touches him lightly, but something in him ages nonetheless. The fire that once burned so bright has banked to embers, sustaining him but providing no warmth. When the Dark Elder raid finally comes, providing the excuse he has been seeking perhaps without knowing it, Jaghatai Khan responds with an intensity that surprises even his closest companions. The raid is not significantly different from countless others that the Drukhari have launched against Imperial worlds, but the Khan treats it as though the fate of the Imperium itself hangs in the balance. Perhaps for him it does. Perhaps the stolen sons of Chigoris represent something more than military assets, a connection to the homeworld he has not seen in centuries, a link to the identity he forged before the Emperor ever found him. Perhaps the Drukhari's violation of that connection triggers something that has been building since the heresy ended. Or perhaps After centuries of hunting enemies who refuse to stay dead, Jaghatai Khan simply wants to chase something new. Whatever the reason, the hunt into the webway begins. And the great Khan, for the first time in more years than any mortal could count, feels something stirring in his heart that might be hope. The Dark Eldar, the Drukhari as they style themselves, are ancient beyond human comprehension, their civilization stretching back to an age when humanity's ancestors huddled in caves and feared the dark. They are the degenerate descendants of the Eldari Empire, those who chose corruption and cruelty over the more moderate path of their craft world cousins. Their dark city of Komorra exists within the webway, that labyrinthine network of interdimensional passages that allows travel without exposure to the warp. From this hidden realm, they raid the galaxy for slaves and victims, their torture ships appearing without warning and vanishing just as suddenly. Their speed and stealth make them almost impossible to catch, their cruelty ensuring the capture is a fate worse than death. When they strike at Chogoris itself, they make the greatest mistake of their existence. The raid begins like countless others. Drukhari vessels emerging from a hidden webway portal, descending on an outlying settlement with predatory grace. The inhabitants are taken quickly and efficiently, their screams cut short as the raiders bind them with molecular chains and drag them toward the waiting ships. Among the captured are warriors of the White Scars, young initiates who are traveling to join their chapter. The Drukhari take them as they take the others, seeing in their enhanced physiology the promise of exceptional suffering. Space Marines can survive torments that would kill ordinary humans in seconds, making them prized acquisitions for Komorra's torture masters. Word of the raid reaches Jaghatai within hours. The Khan's reaction is immediate and absolute. He gathers every available White Scar, every ship that can be made ready, every warrior who can ride to war. The Drukhari have taken his sons from his own homeworld, violated the place that holds his heart even after all these years. Such an offense demands response that the galaxy will remember. But how does one catch creatures who can disappear into dimensional corridors that no human technology can follow? Jaghatai's solution emerges from the Stormseer tradition that has guided the White Scars since their founding. The Seers reach out through the warp, seeking traces of the webway portal that the Drukhari used. The webway exists simultaneously in real space and the immaterium, which means that its passages leave psychic traces that the right kind of seeker can detect. They find what they are looking for, a doorway that is not quite closed, a weakness in the barrier between dimensions that can be exploited by those willing to take the risk. The Khan does not hesitate. He leads his warriors into the webway itself, pursuing the Dark Eldar through passages that no human has ever survived. The dimension they enter defies ordinary understanding, corridors that twist through impossible geometries, chambers whose walls shift and change according to rules that no mortal mind can comprehend. The very act of existing here requires constant effort, a battle against an environment that seeks to unmake everything that enters it. The White Scars adapt, as they have always adapted. Their jet bikes prove capable of navigation in this strange realm, their speed allowing them to outrun the dimensional anomalies that would otherwise consume them. The Stormseers use their powers to maintain a psychic anchor, preventing the webway's reality warping effects from scattering the strike force across infinite possible dimensions. They hunt the Drukhari through this nightmare landscape, following traces of the raiders' passage deeper and deeper into the webway. The Dark Eldar respond with increasing force, their arrogance turning to alarm as they realize that something is hunting them through their own territory. The fighting is savage and continuous, White Scar's warriors falling to the Drukhari's poisoned weapons, while Drukhari die in equal numbers to Bolter and Blade. Jaghatai pushes forward relentlessly, accepting losses that would break other commanders because he refuses to abandon his sons to the tortures of Comora. They find the captives eventually, in a holding facility whose purpose the White Scars prefer not to examine too closely. The rescue is brutal and brief, the Khan's warriors cutting through the Drukhari guards with an efficiency born of desperate rage. The survivors, those few who still live after their initial treatment at the hands of the torturers, are loaded onto evacuation vehicles and sent back toward the original portal. Jaghatai himself does not accompany them. The Khan has caught sight of something during the fighting, a glimpse of his true quarry disappearing down a corridor that leads deeper into the webway. The Drukhari leader, an Archon whose cruelty is legendary, even among their depraved kind, is fleeing rather than facing the vengeance that pursues him. Jaghatai cannot allow that. He signals his most trusted warriors to remain with the evacuees, ensuring their return to real space. Then he turns his jet bike toward the corridor down which his prey has disappeared, and he rides into the darkness alone. The depths of the webway grow stranger as Jaghatai descends, the passages twisting through dimensions that human minds were never meant to perceive. Time loses meaning here. Hours might pass in real space while seconds tick by in the corridors, or vice versa. The Khan has no way of knowing how long his pursuit lasts, only that he refuses to abandon it. The Drukhari Archon remains just ahead of him, visible in glimpses around corners and through portals, always escaping at the last moment. The creature is playing a game, leading Jaghatai deeper and deeper into territory where no human has any right to survive. Perhaps it believes that the webway's dangers will accomplish what its warriors could not, that the Khan will simply cease to exist if drawn far enough from any exit. Perhaps it is right. The webway around Jaghatai begins to change, the relatively stable passages giving way to regions where reality itself seems uncertain. He passes through chambers that contain fragments of impossible worlds, shattered realms that might be memories or prophecies, or simply the fever dreams of a dying dimension. He rides along corridors where the walls are made of frozen screams, where the floor is an endless fall and the ceiling is an absolute nothing. His jet bike's engines strain against the distorted physics, warning runes flashing as systems designed for real space struggle to function in this impossible environment. The Khan pushes forward regardless, knowing that stopping means death and retreat means surrender. He catches up with the Archon at last in a chamber that defies description, a space that seems to contain all the webway's accumulated malevolence distilled into a single location. The Drukhari stands at the chamber's center, surrounded by bodyguards whose forms have been modified beyond recognition of their original species. The Archon speaks, its voice carrying threats and offers and mockery in equal measure. It promises Jaghatai a fate worse than anything he can imagine if he persists, offers him release if he will simply turn back and trouble the Dark Eldar no more. The Khan's response is his blade sweeping toward the Archon's throat. The battle that follows pushes Jaghatai to his absolute limits. The Drukhari Lord is no match for a Primarch in direct combat, but it has chosen its ground well. The chamber's unstable reality works against the Khan, floor shifting beneath his feet, walls closing in to restrict his movement, the very air turning caustic with dimensional energies. The bodyguards attack in waves, their modified bodies capable of feats that should be impossible, and behind them all, the Archon strikes from unexpected angles with weapons whose effects defy natural law. Jaghatai falls back on the skills that made him the greatest mounted warrior of Chagoris, treating his jet bike as an extension of his own body in a dance of death that claims enemy after enemy. He ignores wounds that would incapacitate lesser beings, fights through pain that should render him unconscious, refuses to acknowledge any limitation that might slow his pursuit of vengeance. When the Archon finally falls, cut in half by a strike that Jaghatai barely remembers delivering, the Khan finds himself alone in a chamber that has begun to collapse around him. The webway's stability in this region has been compromised by the fighting, passages sealing themselves as the dimension tries to heal the damage that has been done to its fabric. Jaghatai looks for an exit and finds none. Every corridor that he might take has sealed, or is in the process of sealing. The chamber shrinks around him, walls closing in with geological patience that will nevertheless prove fatal if allowed to continue. He should feel fear. Instead, he feels something closer to peace. The Khan has spent his entire existence in motion, chasing horizons that always receded before him. He conquered Chagoris and found it too small. He joined the Great Crusade and found it too constrained. He fought the heresy and watched everything he valued burn. He pursued the scouring and discovered that vengeance provides no satisfaction. Perhaps this is where the pursuit ends, alone in the darkness between dimensions, surrounded by the corpses of his enemies, having saved his sons at the cost of his own existence. It is not the death he would have chosen, but it is not without honor. The chamber shudders around him, and for a moment, Jaghatai Khan closes his eyes. When he opens them again, he sees something that should not be there. A doorway, shimmering into existence on the far side of the chamber. Through it, he can see stars, real stars burning in real space, a galaxy that continues to exist despite everything that has happened. The door is too far away. The chamber is collapsing too quickly. There is no way he can reach it in time. The Khan laughs, a sound that echoes strangely in the dying dimension. Of course. One more challenge, one more impossible obstacle, one more chance to prove that speed can overcome anything. That motion is life, that stillness is death. He mounts his jet bike one final time and rides toward the light. The white scars who waited at the original portal see something emerge at the last moment before it seals. A blur of motion, too fast to track, that streaks across their formation and vanishes into the distance. Some swear it was their Primarch, returning from the depths in characteristic fashion. Others believe it was simply a trick of the light, the webway's final deception before it closed forever. Jaghatai Khan is never seen again. The search begins immediately. White scars ranging across the galaxy in hope of finding some trace of their father. They check every world where he might have made planetfall, interrogate every source that might have information, follow every rumor no matter how unlikely. They find nothing. Months become years, years become decades, decades become centuries. The Imperium changes around the white scars, transforming from the wounded but a hopeful civilization of the post-heresy period into the grim theocracy of the 41st millennium. The Emperor becomes a god, worshipped by trillions who never knew him as anything but an image on temple walls. The Primarchs fade into legend, their humanity obscured by millennia of mythologizing. Jaghatai Khan becomes a figure of prophecy rather than history. The white scars preserve his memory with a devotion that borders on obsession. Every warrior of the chapter knows the stories of the great Khan, his conquest of Chagoris, his lightning campaigns during the Crusade, his heroism at the Siege of Terror. They learn the philosophy he taught, the importance of speed and freedom, the rejection of the stifling conformity that defines so much of the Imperium. And they believe, with absolute certainty, that he will return. This belief is not mere hope or wishful thinking. The Stormseers maintain that the Khan still lives somewhere in the webway, continuing his endless pursuit through dimensions that human minds cannot comprehend. They point to visions and portents, fragments of prophecy that speak of a final battle in which the great Khan will ride once more at the head of his sons. The chapter organizes itself around this expectation. The Khan's quarters aboard the Swordstorm are maintained exactly as he left them, waiting for his return. His position as chapter master remains technically unfilled, with the ranking captain serving only as a regent rather than a true successor. When the White Scars ride to war, they leave a place of honor empty at their Primarch's side. 10,000 years of waiting have not diminished their faith. The Imperium of the 41st millennium is a place that Jaghatai would struggle to recognize. The Emperor's dream of secular enlightenment has been replaced by religious fanaticism that the master of mankind would have despised. The legions have been broken into chapters, their power deliberately limited by the very rules that Roboute Guilliman created to prevent another heresy. Freedom, the value that Jaghatai prized above almost anything else, has been sacrificed to survival in a galaxy that offers no mercy to the weak. Yet something of the Khan's spirit survives in his genetic sons. The White Scars remain the inheritors of his philosophy. Warriors who prize speed and independence even in an Imperium that values neither. They maintain their Chagorian traditions, their Stormseer practices, their refusal to be bound by conventions that serve no purpose. They fight as the Khan taught them, striking hard, striking fast, never remaining in one place long enough to be pinned down, and they wait. The legends say that when the galaxy burns in its final apocalypse, when the enemies of humanity mass for the killing blow, the great Khan will return to lead his sons one last time. He will emerge from the webway at the head of an army beyond counting. Warriors who have fought alongside him across 10,000 years of dimensional warfare. And he will ride to Terra's defense as he rode once before. Whether this prophecy is truth or desperate hope, none can say. The webway keeps its secrets, and the darkness between dimensions offers no answers to those who question it. Jaghatai Khan remains lost, or found, or waiting. His fate unknown, and perhaps unknowable. But on Chagoris, when the wind howls across the endless steppes, the tribespeople still tell stories of the great Khan, who unified their world and rode to the stars. They say that on certain nights, when the aurora fills the sky with ghostly light, you can hear the thunder of his jet bike's engines echoing across the plains. He's coming back, they whisper. The great Khan is coming back. They have been saying it for 10,000 years. They believe it now as much as they ever did. The millennia pass, and the White Scars wait. Each generation of warriors grows up, hearing the stories of the great Khan, learning the philosophy he taught. training in the tactics he developed. They know his name before they know their own, worship his memory with a devotion that the imperial cult reserves for the emperor himself. But they also know that their father is not dead. This belief distinguishes the White Scars from most other chapters whose primarchs have been lost. The imperial fists mourn Rogel Dawn, whose hand was all that remained after his final battle. The Raven Guard honor Corvus Corax, who vanished into the eye of terror seeking redemption for sins he could not forgive himself. These chapters remember their fathers as fallen heroes, martyrs to the imperial cause. The White Scars remember Jaghatai Khan as a living presence, temporarily absent but destined to return. The Stormseers maintain constant psychic vigil, their senses extended into the warp in search of any trace of their Primarch's presence. They claim to feel him sometimes, a distant echo, a whisper on the edge of perception, a sense of movement in dimensions that ordinary senses cannot perceive. Whether these sensations represent genuine contact or wishful thinking, none can say for certain. But the faith persists. The chapter organizes itself around the expectation of the Khan's return. His quarters remain prepared. His place at the head of the great Khan's table remains empty. His standard is carried into battle alongside the chapter's own. New initiates are taught that they serve a Primarch who watches them still, who will someday return to lead them in battles that will reshape the galaxy. This belief provides both strength and burden. Strength, because it gives the White Scars a sense of purpose that transcends ordinary duty. Burden, because 10,000 years is a long time to wait, and even superhuman patience has limits. Some warriors, over the millennia, have questioned whether the faith is justified. Perhaps the Khan truly died in the webway, his body consumed by dimensional forces beyond human comprehension. Perhaps the Stormseer's visions are nothing more than self-deception, the mind seeing what it desperately wants to see. Perhaps the waiting is ultimately futile, and the chapter would be better served by accepting loss and moving forward. These doubters are never numerous, and they are never encouraged. The White Scars' identity is bound up with the belief in their Primarch's return. To abandon that belief would be to become something other than what Jaghatai Khan created. The chapter has chosen faith over certainty, hope over acceptance, and they have maintained that choice across millennia of silence. The Great Rift changes things. When the galaxy tears itself apart, when the barrier between real space and the warp fractures along a wound that spans from the Eye of Terror to the Hadex anomaly, the Stormseers feel something stir that they have not felt in centuries. The webway churns with energies that suggest massive disturbances in its fabric. Passages that have been sealed for millennia begin to open. Dimensions that were once separate begin to bleed into each other. Something is happening in the darkness between worlds, something that might be the Great Khan finally finding his way home, or something that might be far worse. The White Scars mobilize with renewed urgency, their ancient faith suddenly feeling less like tradition and more like prophecy. The signs that their Stormseers have studied for 10,000 years seem to be aligning. The moment they have waited for across more generations than any mortal could count may finally be approaching. The Great Khan is coming back. They believe it now as they have always believed it. And in the darkness of the webway, something ancient stirs and begins to move. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The galaxy burns with conflicts beyond counting, its stars obscured by the smoke of burning worlds and the tears of grieving mothers. Humanity fights for survival against enemies that would consume or enslave it. the ancient Eldar, the ravening Tyranids, the implacable Necrons, the endless Orc hordes, and always the servants of chaos who hunger for mortal souls. The White Scars fight as they have always fought, swift as the wind, deadly as the lightning, free as the great steppes of Chogoris that bred their first warriors. They have changed in 10 millennia, as all things change with the passage of time. Their numbers are a fraction of what the Legion once commanded, their equipment maintained and modified across countless generations of artificers. The Primaris reinforcements have brought new blood and new capabilities. Warriors who carry Jaghatai Khan's genetic legacy in bodies enhanced beyond even the original Astartes template. But in essence, they remain what the great Khan made them. When the Indomitus Crusade reaches Chogoris, the White Scars join it with characteristic enthusiasm. Robert Gilliman, reborn after 10,000 years of stasis, represents a link to the age when Primarchs still walked among humanity. His return has sparked hope across the Imperium, a belief that the darkness might finally be pushed back. The White Scars ride to war beside their Gene Uncle's forces, their speed providing the lightning mobility that his Ultramarines sometimes lack. They strike at Chaos forces across the galaxy, their blades harvesting traitors and heretics in numbers that honor their Primarch's memory. Yet even as they fight, they look for signs of the Khan's return. The Stormseers maintain that the conditions are aligning, that ancient prophecies are moving toward fulfillment. The Great Rift has torn reality apart, opening passages between dimensions that have been sealed for millennia. The webway churns with energies that suggest massive disturbances in its fabric. Something is stirring in the darkness between worlds, something that might be the great Khan finally finding his way home. Or it might be nothing. It might be just another false hope in an existence that has provided so many. The White Scars do not allow uncertainty to diminish their faith. On the eve of a great battle against chaos, forces in the Damocles Gulf, the chapter's commanding officer addresses his warriors in the manner that has become traditional over millennia. He speaks of duty and honor and the obligations that bind them to the Emperor's service. He speaks of the enemies they will face and the tactics they will employ. And then he speaks of the great Khan. He tells them that somewhere, beyond the veil of reality that separates the dimensions, their father rides eternal. He tells them that Jaghatai Khan has not abandoned his sons, that the hunt continues in realms beyond human comprehension, that when the time is right, the great Khan will return to lead them in the final battle. The warriors listen with the intensity of those who hear sacred truth. Their faces, marked with ritual scars in the Chogorian tradition, carry expressions of absolute faith. They believe what their commander tells them because they have always believed it, because their fathers believed it and their fathers' fathers, back through 10,000 years of waiting. The belief sustains them. It has sustained the White Scars through defeats that would have broken other chapters, through dark ages when hope seemed foolish and faith seemed naive. The great Khan is coming back. The prophecy will be fulfilled. Their patience will be rewarded. Until that day comes, they fight. The battle begins at dawn, a deliberate echo of Operation Dawn so many millennia ago. White Scars forces strike from multiple vectors simultaneously, their speed overwhelming traitor defenses before effective response can be organized. Jet bikes scream across the battlefield, their riders harvesting enemies with blade and bolter. Land speeders and aircraft provide support, their weapon systems tearing into armored formations. And behind it all, The heavier elements of the force advance to consolidate the gains that the lightning strikes achieve. It is a warfare as the great Khan taught it. Warfare as the White Scars have practiced for 10,000 years. Among the warriors who fight that day, there is one who carries a relic of particular significance, a power glaive that once belonged to Jaghatai Khan himself, preserved across millennia for a worthy bearer. The warrior wields it with skill that honors his Primarch's memory, the blade's edge claiming traitors by the dozen as he leads his squad through the enemy's heart. In the battle's final moments, when victory is assured and the last traitors are being hunted down, the warrior pauses atop a ridge overlooking the battlefield. The wind catches his hair, carrying with it the smell of blood and promethium and the electric tang of discharged energy weapons. For just a moment he closes his eyes and listens. The wind speaks to him, as it speaks to all sons of Chogoris. It whispers of distant lands and endless journeys, of freedom found in motion and truth discovered in the chase. It carries echoes of battles past and prophecies yet to be fulfilled. And somewhere in his voice, he hears the distant thunder of a jet bike's engines. The great Khan is coming back. The wind carries his promise, and the White Scars, as they have always done, ride on. The culture that Jaghatai Khan created within the White Scars Legion represents perhaps his greatest and most enduring achievement. Weapons can be replaced, tactics can be adapted, but culture, the soul of an organization, endures across millennia and shapes everything that follows from it. The brotherhoods form the foundation of this culture. Each brotherhood functions as a semi-independent fighting force, with its own traditions, its own specializations, its own unique character. The first brotherhood maintains the oldest traditions, its warriors tracing their lineage back to the original Talskar tribe. The fourth brotherhood specializes in armored assault, their predators and land raiders modified for the high-speed warfare that defines White Scar's doctrine. The eighth brotherhood emphasizes infiltration and reconnaissance, their warriors serving as the eyes and ears of the chapter. Yet for all their differences, the brotherhood share common principles that unite them into a coherent whole. Every warrior learns the same basic skills during his years as a neophyte: riding, tracking, ambush tactics, the reading of terrain and weather. Every warrior carries the same scars upon his face, earned through trials that test courage and skill. Every warrior knows the songs and stories that have been passed down since Chogoris, the cultural heritage that connects them to their Primarch across 10,000 years. The scarification ritual deserves particular attention, for it embodies much of what makes the White Scars distinctive. Unlike the ritual wounds that other chapters inflict, the scars of the White Scars are chosen and meaningful. Each scar represents an achievement, a victory, a lesson learned. Warriors compare their scars as others might compare medals, reading in them the history of a lifetime of service. The first scar is earned upon acceptance into the chapter, a small mark on the cheek that announces the warrior's new identity. Subsequent scars follow significant accomplishments: first kills in major campaigns, successful brotherhood trials, acts of exceptional valor or skill. Senior warriors may carry dozens of scars, their faces transformed into maps of their service. The ritual itself is painful, deliberately so. The White Scars believe that pain has value. It clears the mind, focuses attention, reminds the warrior of his mortality. The scars heal cleanly, thanks to Space Marine physiology, but the process of earning them is remembered long after the wounds close. This approach to pain reflects a broader philosophical principle. The white scars embrace difficulty rather than avoiding it, where other chapters might seek the most efficient path to victory. The sons of Jaghatai Khan sometimes choose harder roads because the journey itself has value. They believe that warriors who face only easy challenges become soft, that strength comes from testing oneself against worthy opponents. The Storm Seers amplify these cultural elements through their role as spiritual guides and keepers of tradition. They are not simply psykers who use their abilities in battle. They are repositories of knowledge, teachers who pass down the accumulated wisdom of the chapter across generations. When a young warrior needs guidance, he goes to a Storm Seer. When a brotherhood faces a difficult decision, its Khan consults with the Seers. When the chapter as a whole must choose its path, the chief Storm Seer speaks with an authority that even the chapter master respects. This arrangement might seem to create divided leadership, but in practice, it functions smoothly. The chapter master commands in matters of war and administration. The chief Storm Seer advises on matters of spirit and tradition. Both respect each other's domains, and both understand that the chapter's welfare supersedes any personal authority. The White Scar's approach to the warp deserves special mention. Unlike many other chapters which view psychic powers with suspicion or outright hostility, the sons of Jaghatai Khan embrace their psykers as valued members of the Brotherhood. This acceptance stems from Chagorian traditions that predate the Imperium, shamanic practices that viewed the spirit world as a natural extension of physical reality rather than a threat to be feared. The Storm Seers ride the currents of the immaterium rather than trying to force their way through them. They speak of the warp as a sea, dangerous but navigable by those who understand its patterns. They read omens in the flow of psychic energy, predict future events by observing the warp's currents, communicate across vast distances through techniques that other librarians cannot replicate. This harmony with the warp has made the White Scars more resistant to corruption than some might expect. The Chaos Gods find it difficult to tempt warriors who do not fear what they represent. Slanesh offers pleasure, but the White Scars already find joy in the rush of battle. Khorne offers glory through violence, but the sons of Jaghatai Khan seek victory rather than mere slaughter. Nurgle offers release from suffering, but warriors who embrace difficulty have no need for such escape. Tzeentch offers knowledge and change, but the White Scars are already change incarnate, flowing like wind through any obstacle. This is not to say that the chapter has never faced corruption. No organization fighting in the darkness of the 41st millennium can claim perfect purity. But their losses to chaos have been fewer than many of their peers, a testament to the resilience that Jaghatai Khan built into their cultural DNA. The Great Khan's legacy lives on in every warrior who bears his gene seed, in every scar carved into a young face, in every song sung around campfires on forgotten worlds. He created something that could outlast him, something that carries his spirit across millennia, even as his physical form remains lost in the webway's depths. And perhaps that was his greatest gift to humanity. Not the victories he won or the enemies he slew, but the culture he created that continues to produce warriors worthy of his name. The wind eternal carries them forward, as it has always carried them forward, until the Great Khan returns to ride once more at their head.